It truly serves as a crucial indication that we aren't exclusively addressing violent Islamism, but rather that the government is unequivocally conveying that what's known as political Islam, in other words non-violent Islamism, is also a matter of considerable importance and concern. We are fully aware of that as well. It is, in essence, the very same ideology that violent Islamism leverages to further its objectives and gain ground. The basic principles are, at their core, identical. Hence, it is crucial to communicate that we are not solely concerned with the phenomena of terrorism or violence. Instead, our intention is to intervene precisely where the ideology first begins to take hold, and this unequivocally includes political Islamism and organizations such as Muslim Interaktiv. I mean, particularly on social media like TikTok and Instagram, the so-called algorithm plays an absolutely crucial role. Consequently, individuals actively seeking out Islamic terminology or subject matter pertinent to Islam are, regrettably, very swiftly drawn into the orbit of these Islamist organizations in the present day, and it is my sincere hope that through these types of discussions and various events, ever more room will be fostered for the development of positive narratives.
Mena-Watch, the independent Middle East think tank.
Welcome to MENA Talk. My name is Jasmin Arémi, a journalist with Mena-Watch. My distinguished guest today is Professor Dr. Mouhanad Khorchide, an esteemed theologian at the University of Münster specializing as an Islamic theologian. He is an expert on the subject of political Islam and internal Islamic reform debates within the German-speaking regions. And today we aim to delve into the prohibition of the Islamist group Muslim Interaktiv, exploring its political and social ramifications, the impact these organizations have on Muslim communities, and the crucial roles of both the state and Islamic institutions. Many thanks for dedicating your valuable time today. It's truly wonderful to have you with us.
I look forward to our talk.
On November 5th, 2025, the Federal Ministry of the Interior banned Muslim Interaktiv. There were raids conducted against groups such as Generation Islam, and these operations were also linked with Reality Islam. Interior Minister Dobrindt additionally mentioned incitement directed at Israel, Jewish women's rights, and a caliphate agenda. So how would you fundamentally evaluate this prohibition?
I genuinely believe this prohibition serves as a fundamentally crucial message, specifically aimed at Islamist factions, especially those that maintain a very strong and prominent online presence in today's world. And the underlying signal, or rather the core message it conveys, is that we fundamentally reside within a liberal democratic societal framework. Here, democracy holds sway. This implies that if any such groups believe they can undermine democratic principles under the guise of Islam, they will be noticed, and the state won't merely stand by as a passive observer, but will actively intervene to counteract their efforts. The question, which we will also discuss shortly, is that all there is to it? So, is it truly sufficient to simply ban these groups, particularly their online platforms? We know that any given group, in a very short span of time, specifically within mere minutes, is capable of discovering and utilizing alternative methods to re-establish their presence within the online sphere.
So what does this current situation actually signify for addressing political Islamism within Germany now?
It truly serves as a crucial indication that we aren't exclusively addressing violent Islamism, but rather that the government is unequivocally conveying that what's known as political Islam, in other words non-violent Islamism, is also a matter of considerable importance and concern. We are fully aware of that as well. It is, in essence, the very same ideology that violent Islamism leverages to further its objectives and gain ground. The basic principles are, at their core, identical. Hence, it is crucial to communicate that we are not solely concerned with the phenomena of terrorism or violence. Instead, our intention is to intervene precisely where the ideology first begins to take hold, and this unequivocally includes political Islamism and organizations such as Muslim Interaktiv. Behind this movement stands the organization known as Hizb ut Tahrir, which, when translated literally, means the Party of of Liberation. This group was established back in the 1950s, specifically with the express aim of implementing the caliphate as the one and only legitimate societal framework and governing system, to impose it against democracies, against free and democratic societal structures.
Thus, we can assert that this signifies a fresh governmental resolve in confronting this legalistic Islamism that we have been discussing.
Absolutely. It's a significant indicator that the state is currently not solely focusing on violent Islamism and terrorism, but is also addressing this particular variation. This variant, in my opinion, poses an equal threat and is equally detrimental in its capacity to divide society, undermining its very foundations. It truly undermines democracy and its core values, much like terrorism does. The state is sending a very clear signal here that we intend to address this as well, political Islam.
And you hold a professorship at the University of Münster. So what impact does both this action and this prohibition have on your work concerning prevention, educational and public awareness initiatives? Are you experiencing more of a tailwind or a headwind right now? Have you observed any changes?
This greatly assists us in our prevention efforts because individuals often believe they can express themselves freely as long as they are not openly advocating for violence or terrorism, enabling them to vent their frustrations or ideas. I can also disseminate divisive ideologies on social media platforms that fracture society. Here, the state steps in and declares, wait a minute, I'm going to intervene at a much earlier stage. I'm not going to wait around to intervene at a much earlier stage or until someone is actively planning an intervene at a much earlier stage. I want to address the issue right at its ideological roots. And that's a really significant indication, a vital message. The state's involvement certainly aids our prevention efforts. Above all else, in recent years, we've clearly observed a significant shift occurring within this Islamist movement, increasingly distancing itself from a purely religious discourse, such as that seen in Salafism, which distinguished between we Muslims and the unbelievers. Now, it's not simply we Muslims versus the unbelievers, but increasingly, we are victims of the West. The West as the perpetrator, as the white man, as the racist. Thus, terms such as anti-Muslim racism are employed disproportionately within these groups. If one had viewed the videos from Muslim Interaktiv back in those days, they were less focused on purely religious messages. Instead, they centered around those intensely emotionally charged, moralistic proclamations. We Muslims are the virtuous ones, the oppressed, the victims, and the West is depicted as the oppressor, indeed the perpetrator. And now, by the state declaring, I'm prohibiting such groups, even on social media. I'm fully aware of their activities now. This signifies a fresh start, indicating that we intend to intervene not solely where there's proactive discussion of religiously motivated terrorism, but equally in instances where such ideologies are presented through emotional, moralizing messages. Our aim is to commence our efforts in those very areas as well.
The groups associated with Muslim Interaktiv have, as you briefly touched upon, maintained an active presence across various social media platforms for several years now. Just how perilous is the direct influence stemming from social media, particularly when considering its impact on adolescents? I would say not just those with a Muslim background, but rather more broadly on young people in order to avoid entirely generalizing.
I mean, particularly on social media like TikTok and Instagram, the so-called algorithm plays an absolutely crucial role. Consequently, individuals actively seeking out Islamic terminology or subject matter pertinent to Islam are, regrettably, very swiftly drawn into the orbit of these Islamist organizations in the present day. And that's why banning them is, of course, helpful for prevention work. However, younger individuals often find themselves at a loss when trying to discern what truly aligns with their religious beliefs and what does not, particularly when these communications, as previously mentioned, are presented with such intense emotional appeal. We are observing an increasing number of young people are being reached by this message, and thus they become, so to speak, quite easy prey for such Islamist groups, becoming highly susceptible to their influence and radicalization. This fact has consequentially led to a situation where we now understand, particularly within the Islamist scene, that the age at which radicalization occurs has substantially and alarmingly decreased. Thus, we are discussing young individuals aged 12 or 13 and above who are undergoing radicalization and subsequently affiliating themselves with such organizations. This is solely achievable because it's not merely a theological argument. Instead, it conveys an emotional message that resonates far more readily with young individuals. Most importantly, it speaks directly to them, to their sense of self and belonging, and it tries to construct a new one, we, the oppressed, and it might also exploit existing negative experiences of disadvantage here and there. This exploitation can sometimes fuel their narratives or grievances, making young individuals more susceptible to radicalization. But to exploit that by making sweeping generalizations, claiming that society, the Western world as a whole, is racist, anti-Muslim, and deeply Islamophobic. These messages emotionally resonate with an increasing number of youths, and that is precisely what's so dangerous about these kinds of groups.
Therefore, alongside this prohibition, it is genuinely necessary to implement educational opportunities in schools focusing on media literacy. There actually even exists a term called TikTok Islamism. It's become established because TikTok, of course, stands out in a particularly negative way in this regard. And there's a lot of online radicalization, open propaganda for violence, and content with a clear Islamist theology, or rather ideology. TikTok is a grey area. So what do you believe needs to occur here, potentially involving the EU as well, in order to effectively curb this escalating issue?
All right, 2 points. Firstly, these prohibitions are indeed crucial. Therefore, by doing so, a very clear message is conveyed. We are not passively standing by and observing. Rather, we intend to restrict the available spaces, including digital ones, as much as possible for these kinds of groups and their activities. We also want to make access more difficult. That plays a role too. Age restrictions. There are also deliberations concerning age limitations for social media usage. That could also prove helpful. So that's one significant point. However, merely implementing such bans and access limitations will not suffice to eradicate this phenomenon. What is truly and urgently needed, particularly at the EU level, are proactive projects designed to disseminate and promote alternative offerings across social media platforms. This means if we impose bans, a void still inevitably emerges. Young people who want to delve into their religion or perhaps explore it or even have questions really do need to find answers. And that's why we need more and more authentic projects. By authentic, I mean projects that are not orchestrated by outsiders, but rather initiated by Muslims themselves. This prevents the perception that they're imposed from above. Instead, it's actual Muslims who are actively working to educate, developing alternative projects and offering diverse alternatives on various social media platforms. At the moment, that's missing, but it is very, very important to implement such measures at a European level as well. And certainly on a European scale, there's an ongoing demand for increased enlightenment. Where is education most effective? Beyond social media, it's also within the educational system. This means the more we successfully manage within the education system to specifically, we're talking about media literacy today, empower young people so that when they are engaging with social media platforms, they are fully capable of discerning between content that is humane on the one hand and that which is inhumane. On the other hand, there are offerings within social media such that individuals themselves are capable and educators are able to proficiently manage social media and educate others effectively. For that, we also need targeted training, targeted programs when it comes to media literacy.
Considering the whole situation from a more expansive viewpoint, what specific role does digital propaganda truly play within the realm of Islamism or extremist Islamist ideology?
Today, Islamist ideologies are predominantly active within digital spheres, with very little presence remaining in traditional mosques. So Muslim Interaktiv, Hizb ut-Tahrir, they lack mosque communities, unlike Salafism. Nowadays, they mainly operate through social media platforms. Radicalization occurs there. Those are the intellectual spaces where Islamist ideologies are propagated, and for a considerable period, the significant role that social media platforms and various social channels play in this context was largely underestimated. It's even more crucial now to open our eyes wider and, as mentioned, not solely focus on prohibitions, but also consider alternative solutions.
Now that this ban is implemented, looking at the long term, what about similar networks, or perhaps even some brand new offshoots? Do you anticipate any repercussions, even for reform-minded Muslims who actively distance themselves from Islamism? Do you believe they might now experience discrimination simply because the overall debate could potentially linger and perpetuate in this particular direction?
So, on one hand, reform-oriented Muslims should also recognize and utilize the significant role of social media as a valuable resource. I frequently notice that approaches focused on reform tend to be overly intellectual. For instance, people address questions such as, how can the Quran be read historically critically? How can one engage with the history of Islamic ideas and discover approaches that elucidate the rational elements within Islam, approaches that enlighten? This is all crucial, but it tends to be too elitist for broader appeal. Young people today don't read the Quran. They have no interest in historical critical methods or any methods of reading the Quran at all. So, besides this intellectual work, I stress alongside, not instead of. Thus, this intellectual work is indeed important, and that's one significant aspect. However, the other point that you raised earlier is also quite crucial. One can certainly observe that reform-oriented positions are increasingly subjected to facile attacks, particularly within the realm of social media platforms. Many young individuals, and I find myself in a similar situation, are unable to articulate precisely why they are targeting someone. But they hear, oh, he's too liberal, or heretical, or un-Islamic, and then such views get attacked on social media. However, I view this as a valuable resource, providing an opportunity for us to intervene. We can say, even if these young individuals challenge liberal viewpoints, this very situation offers a chance for these liberal ideas to connect with those young people precisely because they are already engaged in the ongoing discourse. So, we also need to act proactively here, and as I mentioned, liberal approaches must also truly discover social media for themselves and engage more actively on those platforms.
Therefore, we absolutely require fresh approaches and increased empowerment, particularly in the online sphere, to persist in combating this ongoing de-radicalization process effectively.
Definitely, and especially in youth language, not so highbrow.
You recently participated in the Tikva Institute's Autumn Academy in Berlin, where you presented a lecture on the fascinating topic regarding the challenges confronting Judaism's younger sister. Could you perhaps briefly explain what the content of this lecture was and what specific challenges emerged within this particular discussion?
My primary concern was, especially considering our current understanding that anti-Semitism is significantly more prevalent within Muslim communities, including both women and men, compared to numerous other groups, that we should actively strive not just to oppose something like anti-Semitism, but also to additionally, that one can generate pro-Jewish narratives from within Islam, drawing upon its authentic sources and rich history, fostering genuine pro-Jewish approaches. This would mean Muslims move beyond mere tolerance of Judaism to actively embrace and support it, rather than simply stating that we don't wish to exhibit anti-Semitic tendencies. Instead, our aim is to be resolutely pro-Jewish. We are committed to actively fostering and safeguarding Jewish communal existence and establishing environments conducive to a thriving Jewish life. And this was the specific approach I aimed to demonstrate. Within the very wellsprings of Islam, even in the Quran itself, we indeed possess abundant and authentic foundations for a truly pro-Jewish Islamic narrative. And that's why I am stating, it might sound a bit blunt right now, but I truly mean it. There is no Islam without Judaism. The fundamental principles guiding the propagation of Islam are rooted in Judaism. My goal was to advocate for a pro-Jewish viewpoint, authentically derived from Islamic traditions, to genuinely reach Muslims with this important message. This effort seeks to significantly contribute to fostering better comprehension and stronger ties between Islam and Judaism.
What insights were you able to take away from the discussions at the Autumn Academy?
Many people are pleasantly surprised when they encounter such perspectives, and I've observed, particularly during discussions, that numerous attendees expressed reservations, feeling as though we only ever hear the bad stuff. We truly believed Islam was inherently anti-Jewish. These narratives regrettably circulate widely, even among some within the Muslim community. And that's precisely why it proved to be an a moment for so many. I've observed that we still have a considerable journey ahead, even within the Islamic community, to effectively engage with and reach Muslims themselves. The representation of Muslims was not particularly high at that time. This implies a need to distill everything into the educational system within mosque communities, meaning an explicitly pro-Jewish dialogue needs to unfold within Islamic circles. I would argue that such a concept doesn't yet fully exist, and we're truly just at the initial stages. We are still in our nascent period, and it is my sincere hope that through these types of discussions and various events, ever more room will be fostered for the development of positive narratives.
Has this relationship undergone a shift given the current political tensions prevailing since October 7th, 2023, possibly even influencing your lectures?
Well, indeed, a lot has altered and developed since the 7th of October. Firstly, the entire discussion has grown incredibly overwhelmingly and intensely emotional. I also find in my lectures that if one wishes to engage in a purely theological discussion concerning, for instance, pro-Jewish perspectives within the Quran, the conversation invariably veers toward the Middle East conflict and the alignment of factions within mere minutes. So, essentially, whose side are they on? Whenever we find ourselves in group settings, there's a strong and persistent tendency for people to establish and divide themselves into opposing camps. Who's pro-Palestine? Who's pro-Israel? It's like a soccer match, either or. And I try to deconstruct this formation of camps and say that it doesn't help anyone, and certainly not the people affected on the ground. Especially if we just keep throwing accusations at each other from our respective camps and sides, it's not productive. The debate absolutely must be significantly de-emotionalized. It needs to be approached with a greater focus on objective facts, guided by a more solution-oriented mindset. It's not about being in the right, or about who possesses the land, or who has suffered more, or anything like that. That's exactly what I've been observing since October 7th, that discussions tend to strongly move towards this formation of separate camps. At the same time, however, since October 7th, constructive, solution-oriented discussions have been taking place. Well-meaning people on both the Muslim and Jewish sides are saying, let's come together, moving past this camp mentality. We should also make an effort to highlight the shared foundational origins that unite these various religions. We also hosted esteemed guests from the Arab Emirates, for instance, who delivered insightful presentations, actively engaged in discussions, and made concerted efforts to connect with our students. And these individuals were also Muslims who passionately asserted, we are strongly committed to cultivating a powerful and harmonious understanding between Islam and Judaism, extending to both the Islamic world and the State of Israel. They are also politically engaged, and a significant number are aligning with the Abraham Accords. This pact, an accord between the nation of Israel and a number of Islamic countries. A guest from Abu Dhabi also shared insights about the Abrahamic family house located there, a unique place where a synagogue, a mosque, and a church are all found harmoniously coexisting under a single roof. These places exist where people can pray, each in their individual prayer space, all while being united under what's called an Abrahamic roof, serving as a reminder that we are all monotheistic religions and we deeply share common roots. Some pray solely within a church, synagogue or mosque, whereas others, worship in their own distinct fashion. However, for us, the fundamental message remains identical, and those were indeed powerful, genuinely positive stories emerging directly from the Middle East, showcasing true authenticity. I also participated in a discussion where imams and rabbis, specifically those from the Middle East and Israel, respectively, came together in Berlin. For me, experiencing firsthand the positive spaces for encounter that the events of October 7th also brought forth was truly an eye-opening revelation. It's not just the negative, there are well-meaning people who are also looking for solutions, and we urgently need to support them.
Exactly, this battle of narratives has really come to the forefront, hasn't it? But concerning what you just mentioned, these extensive networks that have developed, do you perhaps know of, or could you recommend any specific networks where one could, on a different level, strongly advocate for Muslims and avoid being drawn into this particular narrative? That all Muslims are ideologically corrupted or ideologically unsound. Unfortunately, that's what you read a lot online and hear a lot. That is also very worrying, just like the continuing rise in anti-Semitism. Do you have any recommendations?
I mean, my most crucial recommendation, going beyond the current existing structures, is for each individual to actively deconstruct this idea of forming separate camps within their own minds and to courageously take the initiative, being proactive. I am now going to approach the other person with goodwill, that Muslim communities seek dialogue with synagogues, with Jewish communities, with goodwill, and vice versa. That you say, I'm not going to wait for someone to invite me. I'm not just sitting around waiting for existing structures to bring us together. Instead, I'm taking the lead myself. We increasingly need more individuals and communities, whether Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, who are brave enough to seize the initiative, to actively move forward, to knock on doors, and to never let themselves become discouraged. To simply give up if a positive reaction isn't immediate and forthcoming. That's of utmost importance, and here in North Rhine-Westphalia we have institutions like Begegnen e.V. It's an association that's even sponsored by the Minister-President here in North Rhine-Westphalia. Regular meeting spots are organized where people from Muslim, Christian and Jewish backgrounds, both young and old, can gather and interact. Muslimische, christliche, jüdische Menschen, jung, alt, come together, such gathering places for encounters, and this association is called Begegnen e.V. It's been in NRW for 7 years. That's a possible structure. The institute in Berlin, which is named after the Abraham Accords and is under the patronage of Mr. Armin Laschet, also strives to bring attention to these significant peace plans and agreements, presenting another viable option for fostering understanding. A multitude of events and communal spaces are established there, ensuring active participation for everyone. Apart from that, I am aware of many interactions occurring between Jewish and Muslim communities, whether at universities or within the public domain. I would advise everyone to simply check in their own city, wherever they may be, for available opportunities, and if none exist, then create them yourself. Proactively instigate something yourself. Even if it's merely in the digital realm that people encounter one another, even if one simply says, come on, let's gather together with good intentions, not to form factions, not to debate who is correct or who is more victimized or anything of that nature, but rather let's unite to seek out resolutions primarily for ourselves here. We aren't going to resolve the Middle East conflict from this point, but realistically, we can at least establish spaces for ourselves to promote positive narratives globally concerning Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, specifically regarding the Middle East and the recognition of the state of Israel as it concerns the peace between Israel and the Islamic world as well. Without that, we will sadly continue to experience these problems. We must all finally and fully commit ourselves to achieving peace, regardless of party politics or any particular political developments happening anywhere. Each of us should simply strive, within our own context, to make the best possible contribution we can to foster more profound peace.
That's a nice and important final word. We've also reached the end of our conversation. Will people be able to attend one of your upcoming live lectures or a reading tour event again soon?
Yes, absolutely, with great pleasure. I am available anytime indeed. Right now, having just finished writing my book, No Judaism, No Islam, I am making an effort to introduce and present it in various places, not solely because the book itself is the focus, but more so the underlying concept, the very idea of proposing, let's discuss our shared origins. While I don't recall the specific dates at the moment, I'm frequently on the road, primarily in Germany, more often than in Austria. My aim is to help establish intellectual meeting points where individuals can truly interact and foster meaningful connections, contributing to positive dialogue and understanding. However, anyone who is interested, I'd be absolutely delighted to help out. I'm always willing to contribute whenever and wherever I possibly can.
We'd gladly link your book and its scheduled dates right below the video. That presents no issue whatsoever. This way, everyone can easily access the information precisely.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I wish you all the very best, a pleasant conclusion to the year, and I truly appreciate your time and our discussion today.
Mena-Watch, the independent Middle East think tank. Visit our website as well. There you will find new, current reports, daily and detailed, scientifically based background analyses on the history and present of the MENA region.